There's a waterhole in South Africa. Dry season. Water is scarce. Animals come from miles around just to drink. Zebras, elephants, rhinos, lions. Researchers hid speakers in the trees, and when animals came to drink, the speakers would play sounds: a lion growling, dogs barking, and sometimes just two people having a quiet conversation. Here's what they found. 95% of the animals were twice as likely to run from the sound of human voices than from the sound of a lion. They also fled 40% faster. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second. The entire savannah, every animal in it, had learned at some deep biological level that when a human shows up, something dies. And here's the thing, they're not wrong. But to understand why, we have to go back, way back, to a time when we were anything but terrifying, when we were small, slow, and outmatched by almost everything around us. And we survived anyway. 700,000 years ago, somewhere in Africa, someone struck a piece of flint against an iron-rich rock. A spark landed on dry bark, and the bark caught. They didn't understand what they'd made, but they kept it alive, fed it, learned to carry it. And over generations, they figured out how to make it from scratch, burying birch bark, drawing out the tar, using it to glue stone tips to wooden spears. Fire, the first thing we ever truly controlled. And meanwhile, something else was happening in Africa that would matter even more. The Sahara would green for thousands of years, then turn to desert again. Rivers vanished. Coastlines shifted. The humans who stayed were constantly forced to adapt to environments that kept changing underneath them. Every generation faced a different test. The ones who failed it died. The ones who figured it out passed something on. By 300,000 years ago, the survivors of that process were the first Homo sapiens. Taller, leaner, built for endurance over brute strength. Now, I find the hunting methods from this period genuinely hard to get out of my head. There's something called persistence hunting, a human chasing an animal for hours across open terrain. We're not faster, but we sweat, and most mammals can't do that efficiently. They cool themselves by panting, which means they have to stop to breathe. We don't stop. Over a long enough chase in the African heat, the animal collapses from overheating. It doesn't die from a wound, it just gives up. And the human walks up calmly. Then there's the buffalo jump. Entire herds of bison driven by coordinated human teams toward cliff edges, not one person hunting, a whole community spread across kilometers of terrain, communicating, executing a plan, together. And if the hunt failed, early humans could survive up to 3 weeks without food. The body burns fat first, then starts breaking down muscle to keep going. A lion that misses its kill has to rest. A human that misses its kill just keeps going. Then 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano called Mount Toba erupted. The ash blocked the sun, the planet cooled, and the total population of Homo sapiens collapsed to somewhere around 10,000 people. We know this because of genetics. Every human alive today carries the low DNA variation of a species that almost disappeared. We were nearly extinct, but we weren't. In isolated pockets across Africa, small groups survived, and in those groups, something the Neanderthals had never fully developed was accelerating. Language, specific enough to describe a plan, detailed enough to trade with strangers, capable enough to carry knowledge across hundreds of miles. Because here's what the Neanderthals had. They were bigger, stronger, masters of their terrain. They had everything, except what sapiens had spent the last 700,000 years building. When the final wave of sapiens left Africa 60,000 years ago, they met the Neanderthals, who had dominated Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. Within a few thousand years, every other human species was gone. By 40,000 years ago, only one type of human remained on Earth: us. Now, what happened next is hard to describe without it sounding like exaggeration. We covered the planet, every climate, every terrain, every environment that anything had ever called uninhabitable. Then we started reshaping those environments to suit us. The wolf became the dog. The wild aurochs became the cow. We didn't just hunt animals, we redesigned them across generations. The animals we had no use for, gone. The woolly mammoth, the cave lion, the giant ground sloth. Wherever humans arrived in the fossil record, mass extinctions follow. We did that casually while building cities. At a certain point, the only things that could realistically kill a human were other humans, and things too small to see. Everything with claws and teeth had been domesticated, pushed into reserves, or eliminated. So we looked outward. Mars is 225 million kilometers away. Early sapiens trading networks stretched a few hundred kilometers, and that was considered extraordinary. Now, we have a rover on Mars sending back photographs. We communicate across the solar system. We built artificial intelligence, a system that learns and generates ideas. We didn't evolve that over millions of years. We engineered it in decades. And in 2022, NASA deliberately crashed a spacecraft into an asteroid 11 million kilometers away and successfully changed its orbit, not to mine it, not to study it, as a test, as a message to the universe. The thing that killed the dinosaurs, we now have a response for it. I want to pause on that sentence, the thing that killed the dinosaurs, because here's what I keep coming back to. The dinosaurs were not weak. They weren't some primitive failed experiment. They ruled this planet for 165 million years. 165 million. We've been here for 300,000. If Earth's history were a single day, we show up with about 90 seconds left. They were extraordinary. And then a rock fell out of the sky. And it didn't matter. Here's something worth understanding about that asteroid. It didn't target the dinosaurs. It didn't choose them. It was a rock, following physics, and it happened to land here. Nature doesn't attack. It doesn't plan. It just moves. And when it moves in a direction that overlaps with your existence, that's your problem. In 2020, a virus crossed from an animal into a human. Within weeks, it was on 6 continents. The species that redirected an asteroid, that built artificial intelligence, that extended its own lifespan by 50 years. Brought to a halt by something so small that 50 million of them could sit on the period at the end of this sentence. And COVID wasn't even the worst of it. The Black Death killed roughly half the population of Europe in 5 years. The plague of Justinian wiped out perhaps a quarter of the world's population in the 6th century. The 1918 flu killed more people than World War I. Every single time. The threat had no brain, no strategy, no intent. We survived all of them, but not because we were invincible, because we got lucky and enough of us were left to rebuild. That's a different thing. And I think about the dinosaurs a lot when I think about this. They didn't do anything wrong. They weren't flawed. They just existed in a universe that doesn't promise the continuation of any species, no matter how dominant. We exist in that same universe. And here's what I find genuinely hard to shake. We are the first species in the history of this planet with the awareness to know we could go the same way. We can read the fossil record. We understand extinction in a way no creature before us ever has, which means we are also the first species that could actually do something about it. We've been here 300,000 years. The dinosaurs were here for 165 million. In our 90 seconds, we've done something no species before us ever managed. We looked at ourselves clearly enough to ask, how does this end? Most species never get to ask that. We do. What we do with that question, how we treat this planet, how we treat each other, whether we choose to act like we understand what's at stake. That's the only part of the story we actually get to write.